The best way to really understand a lesson sequence is to experience it as a learner. And that's the writing project way. We do what we call demonstration lessons and professional learning. And that means we're demonstrating exactly the way it would look like, could look like in a classroom. And then there will be times that we stop and debrief and put our teacher hat on. And you'll think about, this is the way I experienced this learning. This is what these processes did for me. Would I do them just the same way with my students, or would I need to modify them a bit? So as you experience joining a conversation in progress as a learner, as a reader, writer, thinker, and speaker, listener, because there'll be some talking, be thinking about what it's doing for you as a reader and writer, and also what it will do for your students as readers and writers, and what your students would need from you. So let's just dive right in. I'll open the slideshow. I have my writer's notebook handy. I like to use a physical writer's notebook, and I always start out when we start a new lesson sequence and a new topic with a clean page. So I have a clean page here. I have my pencil ready. If you and your students will be working in digital documents, you may want to stop the video right now or just quickly open up a digital document, and you'll be adding to it as you work through the lessons. This is the lesson sequence, the text set for joining a conversation in progress. You would need to copy this for your students, or they would have a digital copy of it. And then this is the slide deck that goes with the lesson. A lot of teachers like to use this slide deck. Some teachers like to study the lesson sequence and make their own slide deck. That's your choice. So let's jump right in. We're going to talk about the civilian use of drones. Now, you know, the military has used drones for many years in military operations. And in the past several years, drones have been available for civilians to purchase. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So in your notebook, you're going to begin tracking your thinking. And this is the first thing you'll write in your notebook. What do you know about drones? Do you have a drone? Do you know someone who has a drone? So I'm going to write for about 5 minutes. You can stop the video here, stop the video, and write your response. Now that we've all written for 5 minutes, let's talk. I'll share first. I actually know a good bit about drones because I've done a lot of studying about them. I don't personally know that I know of anyone who owns a drone, and I don't have one myself, but I do know that people can use them for lots of different things. So like kids can use them for toys, or adults can use them for toys, but then also people use them in their work. So turn to a partner if you're doing this in a physical group of people and share. And in the classroom, you would have your students turn to one another and maybe share out just what they already know about drones, if they have one, and if they're, or if they know someone who has one. So let's learn a little more. So now that we've written what we know already, our existing knowledge of drones, we've put that on our thinking tracker. And now let's become more aware of the issue. This is a headline from the newspaper: drone sales soaring this Christmas, capping a record year for the industry. So this was about 3 years ago. I imagine it's gone up even since then, the sales. Drone sales soaring. I love that use of words because drones fly. Writers often will use, in headlines or titles, they'll carefully choose their words to go along with the topic. And so that was a record year for the industry. So our topic is important, the civilian use of drones, because lots and lots of people are buying them. And so that means it's a lot of people will know about this. And so let's become more aware of the issue. This is from that same newspaper, a little snippet from that. A drone is now one of the most sought after gifts. Lots of people want them. Twice as many drones will be sold in 2016 as in the previous year, numbering 2.5 million. The Consumer Technology Association says sales during the Christmas season will more than double over last year. So what this tells me is, and as a teacher, I like to think this through and think aloud, or I could ask my students, what does this mean? Like, find a fact in there and tell me the implications of the fact. And so kids will say things like, 2.5 million was the previous year. And if it doubles, then, how much would that be? And then sometimes this makes them want to ask for one for Christmas. And some kids will say, well, I got one last Christmas. So lots of people want them, probably not just kids, but also adults are getting them for Christmas. So we're becoming more aware of this topic. And so now now that we know this is a big issue, let's do some research. So if so many people want drones as gifts, then they must be great. But what I have learned is not everybody thinks it's a great thing for all these civilians to be owning drones. And there's a big conversation going on about it. And so we need to do some research and not just look at headlines, but see if, what authorities, what credentialed people are at the table on this issue. But at this point, we want a clean sheet. So turn the page in your notebook or scroll down if you're using a digital document. And we're going to track our thinking. So you can write thinking tracker for civilian use of drones at the top of your notebook page. We're going to track our thinking as we learn more and more about this issue. So let's start learning. Turn and talk to a partner. If you're doing this with a group of people in a Google Doc, write in a Google Doc what your thoughts are. Here's an image, and it is sort of a public service image, a PSA type image from the United States Department of Agriculture. And the title is, if you fly, we can't. Flying drones within or near wildfires could cause injury or death to firefighters and hamper their ability to protect lives, property, and natural cultural resources. So do a quick turn and talk. You can stop the video now to do that. Now that you know what the U.S. Department of Agriculture thinks, and you've heard what your partner, your peers think about this, on your thinking tracker, write what you're thinking right now about civilians using drones. We first learned they're great gifts, people want them for Christmas, and now we've learned that it really hinders firefighters from fighting the fires when civilians are flying their drones near where wildfires are occurring. So what are your thoughts right now? So you can stop the video, pause it right here, and follow the thinking on this slide. Okay, so now let's move on and let's look at what more people are saying. Now, we already know what the U.S. Department of Agriculture Service is saying. We're going to also hear from a farmer, Robert Blair. We're going to hear from the Director of Mosquito Control in Ascension Parish, Louisiana. His name is David Matassa. And we're going to hear from a United States Senator from California, Dianne Feinstein. And we're going to hear from Ian Weston, who is Executive Director of the American Trauma Society, and Jeremy Scott from the Electronic Privacy Information Center. Those people are pretty credentialed, probably have some expertise. And so as we begin to learn, we want to now, in your notebook, right under where you wrote what you were thinking, you want to draw your Atwoodian table. And so that's a circle, and you write civilian use of drones, or if your kids, if you want to go quickly, you can just write drones. And then you want to put a chair, so it begins to look like this. So you have your table and you start putting your chairs. And we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chairs. 6 chairs. Leave a little space at your table because you'll eventually pull up a chair. You can pause the video if you need more time. So this is what your table should look like. A chair and a word balloon, because we're going to capture what they're saying about this topic. So let's start with the USDA Forest Service. We know a little bit already about what they said. And this is where you need to now look at your text set. So we have a block of text. If you want your students, like for example, that this resource can be used with grades 4 through 8 and even 4 through 10 and beyond. So if you want your students to have the entire text, there's a link here. For younger students, we typically just use a snippet and work up to the longer text. So read this to yourself, the statement from the U.S. Department of Agriculture Forest Service. And I have it on this slide. This is what they're saying. Now, at this point, I want to say that you can read this aloud to your students, or you can, if it were me, I would have students read through this. And what you always want to tell students is, because you know, sometimes if our students are struggling readers, all they can see are the words they don't know. But what we want to teach our readers is find the words you know. There will be some you don't. Find the words you know, use those to figure out the ones you don't know. And then if you still can't figure a few out, that's okay. You can still get the meaning of the text. But we know sometimes our students will come to words they don't know and they'll just back up and think they can't read it. So you want to encourage them to find words they know, use those to determine the meaning of the surrounding words that they don't know. And then if they're still left with some they don't know, you want them to learn, that's okay. I can still get the gist of this. Even as an adult, that's what we do when we encounter some very complex text. We find the words we know, use those to figure out the ones we don't. There may still be some things we don't know the meaning of, but we can get the gist of the text. So here we see some words: wildfire, injury, death, hamper the ability, risk, major damage, potential injuries, grounded, halted. And so the takeaway here is that we want to put in on our word balloon, here's their stance. So the USDA Forest Service stance is drones could harm firefighters trying to fight wildfires and damage their helicopters. If they have to wait for drones to clear the area, more damage will be done to property and natural resources. That's a summary of what they've said. So I put that in my own words. Depending on what grade level your students are, you may need to stop do a quick mini lesson on summarizing. Think aloud as you summarize the stance of the USDA Forest Service. And then you're going to continue, and in the classroom, in pairs, you would read what each of these people is saying, and then you would work together to fill out the word balloon. Now, as a teacher, you might be thinking, and this is what I'm thinking. I'm a teacher, and I'm thinking, I might need to model at least one more. I may want to model, let's say, let me find my text set. Let's say I'm going to model how to summarize what Robert Blair said, or I might find one, if I'm teaching 4th grade, I might find the one that has the most complex text, and I would read that aloud, model my thinking of how to summarize that, and then fill out that word balloon in front of the students before I release them to complete the summaries of the stances of the people at the table. So at this point, stop the video, pause the video, and in pairs, or if you're working through this individually, then fill out your word balloons at the table. It's very important that you do this before the next step in the lesson. So now that everyone in your class, or all of you in the professional development, now that you have all filled out your table and your word balloon, you've worked together in pairs, so you've had that peer interaction. That's very important for literacy. That makes us more literate if we can interact with peers. It's not cheating. It's a key step in becoming more literate, to work with others to determine meaning of a text. So get your notebook. So kids would have their notebook, or if they're working in Chromebooks, they would need to walk around with their Chromebook, walk around the room and share with other groups. So remember, they did this in pairs or maybe threes. So each group of 2 or 3 walks around, they find another group of 2 or 3, and they share. So here's what we think Robert Blair is saying. And then the other group says, yes, that's what we think he's saying too. Even if you summarized it a little differently, all summaries won't be the same. The big overview, the big idea should be the same, right? And some of the details. And so then as students do this, they may want to add some things to their own word balloons. Then after the conversation mingle, you'll sit down, and each person individually, you go back to your thinking tracker page where you put your initial thoughts about civilian use of drones. Now that you know some other things, what are farmers saying? What are mosquito control people saying? What's the US Senator saying? That should have changed your thinking. Your thinking is growing and evolving as you learn more. That's what learning is. It transforms you, it changes you, changes your thinking. And so now, has your thinking changed? Why did it? Or what changed it? So go back and add what you wrote now that you know some more facts, include things you learned, and then share with a partner. So pause the video and do this important next step. And that's the end of the first 2 sessions. So we're about halfway finished with this lesson sequence. And at this point, you've done the research. You have probably arrived at a claim, and the next 2 sessions will be beginning to write the essay.